Thank you very much for having me, Goafest. I'm very glad to be here. So we're going to talk a little bit now about creativity in a real-time world. And hopefully there might be some interesting things that we get to learn along the way. So real-time marketing. Hands up everyone in the room that knows what real-time marketing is. Come on, everyone put your hands up. Everyone must know what it is by now. Come on. So obviously social media marketing has been around for a number of years now. There's been a rise in kind of content marketing and really this kind of shift of people being on their devices 24/7, uber connected, using applications there and then, expecting everything at the touch of a thumb or a swipe of a mobile device. It's a real opportunity for everyone who's involved in marketing. You know, everyone's connected, they're engaging every minute. We've got huge opportunities to actually engage with these people and start to educate them about what we're about, how we can help them, how we can make their lives better. The challenge is that as an industry, we've turned around, and I think this kind of hopefully talks to some of the things Neil was talking about in his presentation. Neil, I was thinking as you were talking, brilliant, you're setting me up, this is great. So thanks so much for that, I'll buy you a beer later. More ads in more places, 24/7. That's a good idea, isn't it? The problem that we've got, and this is European data from Comscore, over 7 trillion ads were served digitally in Europe last year. 7 trillion ads. That's a shed load of ads. How many people actually engaged with those ads? Anyone want to shout out an answer? Take a guess. It's actually on the screen, hopefully. It's about less than 0.1%. Probably actually in most cases more like 0.01%. That's a crazily small amount of people who actually care about all these ads that we're serving up to them. And the other problem we have, and it's something that has been touched on in a couple of presentations, is things like spam profiles. You know, the fact that we don't even, for a third of those 7 trillion ads, roughly, weren't even seen because they weren't being presented to a real life human. That's a huge problem, and it's kind of flogging a dead horse. So then everyone went, okay, well, it doesn't matter about the fact that banner ads are kind of yesterday's news, even though we're going to keep spending more and more money on them. We've got social media now. That's a fantastic place for us to start talking to people. Well, yeah, and then you have problems like the one we've just been talking about in the Q&A session before, where Facebook has actually had to make quite a few changes to its algorithm over the last 18 months because actually users are starting to use the platform less than they were before simply because they're getting spammed and bombarded with a huge number of ads. And that's a Global Web Index stat in terms of active usage year on year. I will just qualify that before I get in trouble, which is I'm not saying people are just abandoning Facebook, but just that they're not engaging with it and their relationship with it is changing a little bit. And part of that has been fueled by this constant spamming. Now, from Razorfish's own research released in November of last year, the big problem that we're coming to is consumer apathy. And that was our digital dopamine report. Over 50% of consumers, this is in the UK, US, and China, 3 major markets globally, are just trying to avoid advertising at all costs. We're really, you know, killing ourselves over this. We're completely turning the consumer off from what we're doing. Now, it's well known that that means that consumers increasingly, and this is Forrester data up on the screen, are turning to each other. And in fact, the craziest thing of all is they're now trusting complete strangers more than anything we serve them up because they don't necessarily trust what we're hitting them with in our advertising all of the time. So it's a bit doom and gloom, right? I apologize if I've upset anyone in the room, but you know, I just want to kind of put some stats and facts in front of you guys and say, well, what are we actually going to be able to do about this as an industry going forward? Now, I can imagine a few people in the room are thinking, hey, wait a second, Jonny, you know, you fly in here from Hong Kong, you tell us all this stuff, you know, but we've changed here. We're doing things completely differently. My question is, have you really? People keep coming up to me and saying, and I hear this phrase all the time, I've heard it a few times over the last couple of days, content is king, we're all about content. That's great, so why are there 70,000 people on Facebook's condescending brand page complaining about the fact that they're getting hit with really low value content day after day after day? We're still selling, promoting, and annoying people, let's be honest with ourselves. Then people come up to me and they say, but Jonny, it's okay, we're conversing, we're having a conversation. This particular exhibit is a favorite of mine. I tend to use it at a number of different conferences. I realize it's quite small on this screen, but effectively, on the left-hand side, you have a very cute animal picture. On the right-hand side, you have a very cute animal picture. These are Facebook posts posted 2 hours apart by a local television network in the US. Can anyone tell me who the brand is that they're working with on this particular piece from the photographs? No, it's Toyota. Of course it's Toyota. Can anyone tell me why they might have put pictures of cute pets up in a desperate bid to get more engagement? By the way, you can see there are 11 likes against these 2 posts. It's because their community manager went, hey, when I post pictures of pets on my personal Facebook profile, people really like it. That's the genuine reason, right? This annoys me a lot. And Chari's my kind of cheerleader because she works for Razorfish. She's our Indian CEO, so she's bound to keep applauding, keep cheerleading. I love this. It's all good. The point I'm trying to make here is that this is still promoting and annoying, right? It's spamming people's face up. It was a caption, this competition, where you could win a Toyota, I think. Now, I personally also am victim to this, which is why I get so passionate about it. This is Food Panda. In Hong Kong. I get served this ad in my newsfeed about 50 times a day, to the point where I've actually started to just block it out. I don't even see it anymore. And it's quite large, as you can tell from my newsfeed. This is still interruptive advertising. This is not useful content for people. This is just annoying. This is spamming. And we need to start ruling it out more and more and more. And I think in a real-time world, what we need to do is start looking to publishers, and I know there are media organizations in the room, and content hubs are clues. So The Guardian is a traditional newspaper, which is also now one of the most visited sites on the web. Huffington Post, born out of a blog site that's now grown into one of the biggest content hubs on the web, and YouTube, everyone knows who YouTube are. But why is it that they've actually been so successful? Well, Guardian and HuffPost have actually taken their editorial processes and adapted them to be digital first. For those that haven't visited the Guardian site in a long time, or readers of HuffPost, go and have a look. You know, it's actually all about driving digital engagement first, driving social engagement around the content, and actually, for the Guardian, print is just that thing that they still happen to do on the side. And with YouTube, obviously, the great thing is it's all user-generated, so people can be self-selective, and there's so much video content on there, you can pretty much find anything you want. So why do people use the services that they use 24/7? Well, let's look at some of the success stories in terms of services around the world. Spotify, everyone loves music. Why wouldn't you want streaming music? It gets me through the day, every day, on my desktop. TripAdvisor, been around for forever, but still growing in popularity. People still use it. Facebook tell me that it's still the most used app within their platform. Feel free to correct me, Facebook, if I'm wrong. And then you've got the likes of Uber and Airbnb that have come along in the last couple of years and provide solutions in accommodation and in transport. But what are the reasons why these work? Well, the top two are actually very user-powered, right? Airbnb, you can put up your home, you go through the checks and balances, and you can offer it out to someone to come and stay there while you're not there. TripAdvisor, you know, again, all user-generated content, real reviews. They have their problems with spam as well, but they're trying to sort of sort that out. And then you look at Uber and Spotify, they're actually answering a genuine consumer need. Now, what if we could actually take the kind of those two things, content and actually services, and start combining them? Now, my boss is a guy called Vincent Digenet. He was our APAC president for Razorfish. He's now our chief transformation officer for international. And he's been living in China for a number of years, and he does a talk all around China being 10 years ahead of the West. One of the reasons for this is platforms like Meluxio. Sorry, my Chinese isn't very good. I've not been living in Hong Kong that long. And that's the Chinese Pinterest. And what's powerful about that is it's not just about being able to pin relevant content. There's a community that exists around it. And you can also shop all of those products right there within the platform without ever leaving. So you've got useful content, you've got community, and then you've got that commerce layer that comes in underneath that. But it's very much about thinking about content and community first, and then enabling commerce underneath. And I talk about the 3 C's. I've just named them for you. So content, community, commerce. And that's really, really important. When these 3 things combine, we get to a really, really powerful place. So how are we going to start making a difference here and now? I'm going to say solution number 1 for you is answer a genuine need and don't just contribute to content clutter. What do I mean by that? As agencies, we still get organizations, brands, our clients coming to us and saying, solve my business problem, solve my brand problem. And we come back and say, okay, we'll solve your brand problem. What we're not doing is saying, what is the consumer problem that is contributing to your brand problem, and flipping it and saying, and what role does your brand play in solving that? Sounds like a nuanced change, but it's a really, really important one, because then you start to provide something that's genuinely useful rather than just piling up a load of additional ads around your brand. And for me, this first solution might be the most important thing that I would implore you to take away from today. It's really about usefulness. Why does usefulness work? It has pass on. Now, I was talking to a few people about my talk earlier on today, and apparently the Flintstones aren't that big in India, so the cultural reference might be lost. How many people know the Flintstones? Ah, see? I was lied to. I was lied to. So the Flintstones, 2 million years ago, plus, since we've, in terms of thinking of development and of the utility, when we found something was useful for us, whether it's making fire with a couple of sticks or whether it's a can opener dinosaur, which wasn't a real thing, just I need to point that out, the Flintstones made that up, it still has pass on. We talk about it, we tell people about it because it's useful and it solves a need. Now, the interesting thing is, I'm not saying that you can't, for example, tell me that you're doing a 20% off sale, because if I'm really into Apple products and I'm an Apple fanboy, and you happen to be doing a 20% sale on your e-com site that weekend, then you know what? That's actually quite useful information for me, but you need to know that. You need to know that level of detail about me before you can even start to have that level of engagement, that kind of relationship with me. So solution number 2, the amount of meetings I sit in where we talk about we're going to target this group, we're going to target that group, we're going to target this. One thing that wasn't mentioned in my extensive life biography is that I spent a very short amount of time in Her Majesty's British Army and third generation military. When I was talking about targeting in the army, it had a very different context, and I don't think we want to go out and start shooting people in general. We need to treat people like humans, not just targets, and actually start to be willing to collaborate with those consumers. That's really, really important. We don't just want to be treating them as targets for a promotional message or an ad. They are people. And there's a guy called Brian Kramer who's going around a lot in the US, has been for the last 18 months, talking about, can we please forget about B2B and B2C? We actually need to be talking more about H2H, or human to human, because ultimately we are talking as human beings, as I'm talking to you guys right here now. And solution number 3, from a digital perspective, seamless experience. I talked about this expectation from consumers that they can do everything from one device and they can do it pretty much as and where they are. So they want to be able to get that, serve that great content. They want to be able to participate, share, engage around that with friends, family, significant others. And you know what? They might want to have the option to buy some of those things as well. But they don't want to have to go in a million different directions to make that happen. It's no coincidence that, social commerce in China is becoming a really significant revenue driver because their platforms support all of those things in one place. They're not having to send them off to a third-party platform. There's even now points where social networks in China are looking to be licensed as banks so they can start to even provide monetary services within the network as well. And that all starts to talk to this seamless experience. So that's all well and good, but let's talk about a couple of examples of that. So I've got 4 examples just to talk about now. The first one, actually 1 year ago at the last Goafest, Apathy, who is our executive creative director from Germany, stood up and spoke about all things hair, which had just launched at that point. So that's a Razorfish case study. It was in conjunction with Google and with Unilever. And the thing that I like about all things hair is that what drove it was the realization that millions of people are searching in YouTube every day for ways to do their hair. As you can probably tell from my hair, this does not include me. But the key thing is that there are lots and lots of people finding out, how do I make my hair look like Justin Bieber's, for example. I don't know why anyone would want that, but that was one of the search terms. You know, there are lots and lots of different ways that people are looking for this content, and what we wanted to do was answer that need by creating video content that would start to explain how you could get Justin Bieber's hair if that's really what you wanted. So that channel has grown out over the last year. It's been so successful that we've actually now been asked to launch it in multiple markets around the world for Unilever. So this is a really living, breathing content hub. We've involved the community, so we've got influencers in there who are sort of talking about hair care in their own right. We brought in general consumers. You know, everyone gets to contribute to this. And you know, the smart thing that's now happening is we're enabling commerce at this point. So we're now allowing people to shop those different products as well, should they so wish, so that they also can look after their hair using a variety of different Dove products. So it combines our 3 C's: content, community, commerce. But it starts by actually answering a genuine consumer need and working out what the role of the brand is. The second example on the screen is Birchbox from the US. So for those of you that don't know Birchbox, it's basically a sampling service. You can sign up and you'll get delivered a box each month that contains a range of beauty samples. But what they've realized is that they need to build something more useful around that service. So they've actually launched a companion magazine which is completely digitally enabled, and their content is all around how you can make the most of all the different things that they're providing you with. So they're really thinking about utility that adds a useful adjunct to their core service and offering. And that exists across multiple touch points within social, as well as within their site. 2 more for you, one from Australia and one from China. So on the left-hand side is Samsung Stadium. This is a project I actually worked on, so of course I'm going to put it in there. The good thing about Samsung Stadium, it's actually now been around for a couple of years. But the reason that we launched this was we realized that we want to build something for Samsung using Samsung's technology, so kind of very Android-focused from a mobile perspective, that would be a genuine companion app for sports fans. It would give them access to alternative commentary, so great content from Roy and HG, 2 very well-known Australian comedians, in a platform along with social feeds, allowing them to participate and engage in different discussions in real time around sports games. And in addition, we're capturing the data around all those people. They're able to opt in, and we can actually provide them with a range of different promotions and offers to bring them into stores and allow them to purchase Samsung products to enhance their sports viewing experience in their home. Again, we provide useful content that people actually want. We can provide a sense of community, and we're also delivering a commerce angle on that as well. And the interesting thing about this is Australia's quite a small market, as you guys are probably aware. There's 20 million people or so that live there, and I was living there for a couple of years before I came here. We had 30,000 downloads of that app in the first couple of weeks of its life. 30,000 users picking that up, which might not sound big numbers over here in India, but trust me, it blew everything else out of the water in Australia from an app download point of view, probably about 2 to 1 over the nearest competitors. And then finally, Nike Rise. For those that aren't familiar with Nike Rise, it started life as a pretty simple campaign. So it was in China, it was the search for the next basketball star. It had LeBron James in it. It also had Kobe Bryant as the other sort of celebrity. So far, so normal, right? It's a campaign. What they also did was then use it as an excuse to launch WeChat for Nike Basketball, providing tutorials, tips from Kobe directly to fans, useful content, again, that they can use within a community platform like WeChat, but also, again, making it so that you can shop the different products that Kobe uses to make him able to do those slam dunks. I've actually bought that pair of trainers. I still can't slam dunk as much as I try. I think I need to be about another 2 feet taller and I'll be fine. So I hope from the 4 sort of examples, you start to see a bit of a pattern emerging. When we lead with what is the consumer need? What's the problem that we're trying to solve from a consumer point of view? What's the brand role here? How do we serve useful content, enable community around it, and then we can look to leverage that community and enable commerce in that way. I think too often, as brands, organizations, we're launching straight in with commerce. Let's just get these people and just make them buy our stuff. Let's hammer them over and over again with our advertising. And eventually they'll buy something because they'll just crack under the pressure of 7 trillion ads in 1 year. It doesn't work that way. People just get annoyed and wander off. So that's all well and good. How am I doing for time, by the way? Yeah. I thought I'd just check, because before I came on, everyone went, you better stick to time. So I just checking. How do we actually start to enable some of this? It's great that I can talk about it, but how do we actually enable it? So let's talk about agencies for a second. What we can do is move away from our traditional campaign concepting cycle. And by that, client gives us a brief, we put it in the planning team, about a week later, we get a brief out of that, another 2 weeks of concepting, goes back, we get it signed off. Whole process probably takes about a month. I don't know about you, but that's not very real time at all. And then we launch into a campaign that takes 2 or 3 months after that. So this is about rapid concepting through a more publishing-based model, through an editorial model, where we actually start to take some of the best practice cases from the different publications and apply them to us as an agency and actually be able to turn content around. Look at newsrooms. Newsrooms are turning content out 24/7, no problem. The second one is we need to stop thinking in lines as an industry. You know, everyone wants that copy line, everyone wants that killer hook line, and we're not really thinking about what the genuine consumer problem is and what it is that we're trying to solve here. We're just trying to come up with great sound bites that we think will be sticky with people. And the final point is moving to an open brief. And what I mean by this is it's a framework by which we can continuously concept. So, for example, if you come to me as brand, let's say you are a tourism organization, and I work with a couple, and you're saying to me, my problem is that the US market won't travel to the particular destination that I represent. The reason is that they think that we just provide great shopping and nothing else. That gives me a starting point. That gives me an open brief where I can start to build something out under that and come back with continual concepts that over time start to shift perceptions in that market as to what it is that your destination actually offers through a range of different content, rather than coming back with a campaign brief and going through that whole campaign cycle again. As brands, people talk all the time about brands being publishers. I don't think brands want to be publishers, and when they try, what happens is you get a lot of marketing material coming out, which is really boring and really dull. I'm sorry to say it, but it's true. A lot of brand content is really rubbish. And it's thinking like a publisher. Why couldn't you collaborate better with publishers? Why can't you start to leverage the great content teams that they have and actually look to form interesting partnerships with them, as opposed to trying to build a publishing practice within your own organization? You know, publishers are changing their models as well. In the intro, we talked about Pacific Magazines in Australia. Razorfish has that relationship with Pacific Magazines. We can actually work with their teams and provide content at scale for clients. Leo Burnett have done it with Huffington Post. It's a good model. Let's have a look at it. And then as media, so program shows, these all live in the moment. And when people see them, you've got genuine opportunities for deeper engagement. And that's something that's come up in a few of the talks already around this whole kind of ability to engage around live shows. And I'd also just say at the end, the thing is that people get very worried about real time. When I go into a client and say, let's make you more real time, they run away from me mostly. And the reason being that they think, wow, if I have to produce content every second, every couple of minutes, that's a really hard thing for me to achieve as an organization. But what I'll tell you, I'll let you in a little trade secret, probably about 90% of the stuff that's real time isn't real time, it's pre-planned. It's taking a leaf again out of the editorial book. Look at games. So Samsung Stadium example, we knew that in a rugby game, there's going to be tries scored. We know that there's going to be big tackles. We know probably someone's going to unfortunately go off injured at some point. As an ex-rugby player, I can definitely say that because I went off injured a lot because I'm not that big. Other things that we know are going to happen, there could be controversy, there could be a fight, there's going to be 2 or 3 players are the ones to watch. We started to package up content relating to each of those moments in the game, win, lose, draw, you know, big hits, top players, and we had a whole bunch of pre-approved content ready to go. All we had to do was then customize maybe the copy that went with it to the moment in question, and we were able to then publish that. So all this stuff you can actually pre-create. You can anticipate and build it in advance so that you actually are real-time, but having all those assets ready to go, and it's just about tweaking and changing it enough so it becomes really relevant and drive that relevancy in the moment. So I think a key message for me out of all of this is I would urge you all to start thinking about this and start tomorrow. It's going to get worse if we don't change. Because Generation Z, who are in their teens now, who are coming up fast, they are what I like to call the Hunger Games generation. They are masters of technology. They are not its slaves like the generations before them. Interestingly, if you go to Generation Z and talk to them about what is it, you know, why do you go and use a platform, a social media platform, a large proportion of them will actually come back and say, because it helps me facilitate a meet-up with the friends in real life. They wouldn't use the word facilitate, that's me using that. But the whole thing is that they're actually using their virtual world and their real world, and the two things for them are seamlessly integrated. And they just move between the two without even thinking about it. So they're uber connected, they use chat apps, WeChat, WhatsApp, whatever you like to think. BlackBerry Messenger as well, even. Closed environments, deliberately closed environments where it's more difficult for us as advertisers to reach them. And actually they're quite happy about that if you look at some of the research that's being done with this group already. So we need to think really carefully about how we're going to engage with them so we're not turning them off and we're not going to end up in a position where we can't get our products and services through, we can't run our marketing communications effectively. And in closing, I think I'm pretty much on time, so remember, I'm talking a lot about real-time creativity, about content. But real-time isn't just about content. Probably a few of you have seen Amazon Prime Air, right? So Amazon wants to have a fleet of drones, and they're going to fly them around and deliver things within 30 minutes to their customers. There's a slight problem, a bit of a hiccup with this. They actually started talking about this over a year ago, and the FAA in the US freaked out and shut them down because they were worried about these thousands of drones flying around all over the place. I added this into my presentation this morning from USA Today. FAA has actually approved Amazon to go ahead and start running pilot projects here and run it as research and development. So this is back on. Now, why do we think that Amazon actually wants to deliver things to people in 30 minutes? It's because they're getting that feedback from their customers, and they can see where the future is, that people aren't willing to wait till tomorrow. They're not willing to wait till the end of the week. They want stuff within a couple of hours. And something like this is very real time. So we're talking about supply chain, logistics, operations, all of these things to keep up with consumer expectations. And you can be creative about all of those things. Look at your operations, look at the way you currently go to market, look at your supply chains. Can you really live up in the future and start thinking about it now? Are you going to be able to deliver things in 30 minutes? I'm not suggesting everyone go out and launch drone fleets, by the way, for every single company in the room. But this is about project management being creative. This is about the CFO being creative. Creativity can come from anywhere within the organization. We just have to think in a more real-time world and make sure that we're set up across our businesses to deliver against that. So please, let's make a difference. And if you let me come back next year, I'll hopefully be able to tell you about some of those other things as well. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Jonny. That was a great session. So before I came up, I already have my first question handed to me personally by Ambi. So I'll ask that first before I go on to other questions.
Is it a tricky question? I don't like tricky questions. I might just run off out the door if it's tricky.
It is not really.
Okay.
That's what I think. Okay, so the question is, brand builders have used a battle analogy of campaigns with clear timelines so far, okay? Are we now moving into a slow burn seduction of consumers? And what are the big issues involved?
Can you just say that last bit again?
Yeah, so brand builders have used a battle analogy of campaigns with clear timelines. So like phase 1, phase 2, all of that. And now is it more moving into a slow burn seduction of consumers, which is possibly always on, right? That's what we mean? Yeah.
Yep. Okay, so I definitely think that kind of whole, so I love acronyms, just to warn everyone now. And I came up with one called DICE. And what I was trying to communicate is the fact that, there's probably still a place for campaigns, ultimately, in this brave new world. But they're almost the icing on the cake. They're the firework that you kind of look to ignite around a particularly big event for you as an organization or for you as a brand. What we need to be good at is that D layer, which is dialogue, and that is always on, and that is a very different way of approaching things. And then the I in the middle is around interaction, which is how do we actually start to dial up different ways to engage as almost like mini campaigns as a middle tier. And I think that we still too much focus on those headline campaigns, and we're not worrying enough about that first and secondary layer. Yeah.
Okay, great. You mentioned about Gen Z in your presentation and the changed way of communication and marketing communications. You spoke about change our talent and process. And earlier speakers talked about this whole thing about, younger people being digital natives who've grown in that world, understand it very well. And the older people, not really old, but I think possibly 35 plus as well, being more like digital literate and not really born in that world. And so this is relevant for a lot of people over here because I think the split should be around 50-50 of under 30 and above 30. So the creativity as a profession has been there for, forever actually. Is the creativity of the digital natives more relevant for today's world? Or is it, the digital literates, so the older generation who has been in this profession, are they relevant still? If not, why so? And if they are relevant, how can they become more relevant? And why this whole conversation about digital natives versus, digital literates only?
Yeah, so I think my answer to that is that, of course, they're still relevant because we're not always talking to that particular generation. We're talking to everyone, hopefully who's still alive today on the planet in some way, shape or form. And so I see the best creative work coming out and the best creative thinking coming out when it's blended teams, where you have a mixture of the old and new. You've got different understanding. Because if you're communicating to a 50-plus audience, I've also seen it where, you get a graduate, you get like a 23-year-old creative pairing, and they're trying to talk to a 50-plus-year-old audience. Completely different mindset, completely different way of engaging with digital, and they just don't know how to talk to them. They want to kind of launch a BuzzFeed idea, and not that many over 50s really engage with BuzzFeed. And so I think it's important that you understand, well, who is the audience? What I think we do need to be better at as an agency is understanding who we're trying to talk to and making sure we've got the right blend of skills on the agency side to answer that brief that are going to be able to relate and understand at least where that audience is coming from. So I think everyone has their place.
Great. So both parties have their plates. Okay, you talked about content, community, and commerce.
Yep.
And in India, we find that social commerce is gaining much momentum in recent times.
Yep.
With your experience across markets, where do you find India currently on that curve of growth of social commerce?
Sure. So I think social commerce in general is been a bit of a hot topic for about the last 2-3 years in terms of people trying to work out how they make it work. I talked a lot about China and China kind of being very much leaders in that space, driving a lot of revenue through that combination. I think for me probably India's in the getting started category, in the more at that sort of novice end. But then equally, interestingly, I think that Europe is sitting kind of in that bucket as well. There have been a lot of attempts to make commerce work. 4 or 5 years ago, everyone was trying to, 4 years ago, everyone was trying to launch shops in Facebook through Facebook apps. And then they went, well, they don't really work. Well, no, because they were just launching these things in, they weren't actually promoting the apps, they didn't understand how apps work in Facebook's ecosystem, and they also were cannibalizing their own audiences from their e-commerce store. Actually, this is about providing seamless ways for people to shop. And I think that, the West in general is going on a bit of a journey with that in terms of making that a reality. So I think we should all kind of look to Asia and look to the Chinese market. I think they're leading the way in social commerce.
Great. So I've been told to ask my last question, so post which I can close the session. So the question I wanted to ask you about is your personal switch from publishing and PR and into this world of social creativity and all. So how did it happen? And you did talk about think more in publishing lines and less at campaign levels from traditional move into this. Is that the reason you switched, or because you switched, that is the reason why you think like that?
Probably the latter. No, it's. I mean, the switch was interesting because, as was kind of said at the start, my background was in technology, so part of my degree was computer science at university. So when I moved into journalism and I was talking to bands in dingy pubs in London, and because I had a background in technology, people were going, "Oh, well, you can publish that on a website. Or you can do, you can." I couldn't have been able to tweet about it because Twitter wasn't launched for another 5 years. So I started off that way. When I moved into PR, automatically people were saying, "Well, our clients come to us. They want to talk to some bloggers. You do this technology, digital thing. You can do that." So I think, digital became just a layer of everything that I did through my career. And the more it became important and prevalent, the more I guess I kind of shifted around to better my understanding of digital.